Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm going to talk about a very sad story because that's what I'm working on. The elimination of child labor, which some people, including people who have the best intentions, consider an impossible dream. Honestly, I don't care if it's an impossible dream. It has to be done. We can't continue living in a world where the New York Times can publish just 4 weeks ago that hundreds of children were working for corporations inside of the United States. Of course, 200 years ago, this is the story of the United States. 2 million children were working in the United States. But now, when you think about what happened then, there was a crazy man really committed on a mission, Mr. Louis Hine. Mr. Louis Hine traveled around the United States for more than 10 years and took more than 10,000 photos. These are some of the photos that Mr. Hine took of children working in different types of industries, in different sectors. And of course, it was really incredible that children as young as 8 and even younger often were working for different types of companies for profit. Of course, children were always cheaper to hire. They would not complain, and they would just go to work. Well, this is happening today too. And now UNICEF and the ILO, the International Labour Organization, say that there are 160 million children working worldwide. Unfortunately, I disagree strongly with this. It's not 160 million children. I say that there are more than 300 million children working worldwide. Of course, 300 million is a lot of children. But recently, a study by the University of Chicago and Pennsylvania says that it's not 370 million, as I say, but 375 million children. So there are many more children than UNICEF and the ILO say, and of course, UNICEF and the ILO is the union of all governments of the world in the United Nations. Well, we have a really serious problem because companies from A to Z are benefiting from child labor in different parts of their supply chains, sometimes even inside of the United States. And these are cartoons by different cartoonists who publish them in the newspapers as part of our initiative Cartoons for Change, basically trying to create awareness about how big this problem is in our own consumption. Of course, children are even making the slogans against slavery. Yeah, this is the way it works. Of course, people call this fair trade, but if you analyze it, there are many journalists that would come back and tell you it's a scam. But these journalists know because they have been working in these regions where they produce cocoa and coffee for 10 or 20 years. Of course, as I said before, from A to Z, there is child labor. The question is, what are we going to do to save these children? These two are from Guatemala, like me. And here is The Guardian, a newspaper from the UK that everybody knows, talking about how one coffee company and another coffee company, two of them, were exploiting children as young as 8 in what they call ethical coffee. Well, we all drink either coffee, tea, cocoa, or other things, but there's child labor in so many things. And the issue is quite simple. It's not impossible to fix it because it would take only 10 pence or 10 cents per cup of coffee to fix it. It's nothing. It's really nothing. So can we change the business model which now exploits farmers, workers, and children? Of course we can. It takes 10 cents per cup. The same would happen if we are talking about the blue jeans that I'm wearing, which I bought on purpose for $9.99. But if I had paid $10.99, the women, which are mostly women, which make these jeans, would have their wages multiplied times 4 or 5. There would be zero child labor in cotton, and we could all go home thinking, okay, I bought something very cheap, but in the end, at least the wages were decent. Of course, we also have to think about the environment. But that price, it has to be calculated, including the cost of the environment, including the cost of labor, and of course, including the cost of eliminating child labor. I'm going to give you a figure that sounds very big. It would take $45 billion per year to eliminate child labor in coffee. But that's only 10 cents per cup. It would take between $20 and $25 billion to eliminate child labor in cocoa. But that's 10 cents or 10 pence per candy bar. It's not a lot. But the companies have not sat down and created business models to eliminate child labor or even slavery in their supply chains. And that's exactly what I think all of us should be thinking about. This is not my problem. This is the problem of all these children. But it should be all of our problems too. Because unfortunately, the problem is so big that this is a Norwegian newspaper, and you can recognize me there, saying that an activist is accusing Norway because they profit from the exploitation of tens of millions of children. Yes, Norway, a country that has a great image, is the largest single investor in the world, and they are shareholders in 9,338 corporations. They have about $1.35 trillion in investments, and of course, they invest in hundreds of corporations that exploit minors. And that's another cartoon, the Prime Minister of Norway. Basically, Norway, one of the richest countries on earth, profits from the exploitation of tens of millions of children by investing in the corporations that exploit children. So this has to stop, because on one side, there are shareholders which are profiting from slavery and child labor, which normally would be illicit enrichment in some countries, but depends on the legislation country by country. But on the other side, the shareholders are also being fooled by the corporations because they receive reports that talk that this is an ethical investment, or what they call ESG. And of course, even the pension fund media is talking about this. Yes, an activist is accusing Norway that they profit from child labor. That activist is me. But this is not about me. This is about the children. Yes, tens of millions of children which are working for the profit of one single country, Norway. We could say the same thing about the European Union, where even members of the European Parliament have confirmed that the European Union is the largest and most benefited group of countries of child labor in coffee, cocoa, and many other products, because it's the largest importer. So here is ESG. And of course, there's an organization, and I'm not accusing the organization, but I'm just asking that they reflect on what the reality is, claiming that they have been improving the state of the world for 53 years. Well, the numbers are really against them. More than 75 million children work for the 2,500 business and political leaders that meet in Davos every year. I have been to these meetings 14 times, not necessarily inside, but in Davos during the meetings. And this has to stop. And this is the last thought I would like to leave all of you. These were the words of Martin Luther King when he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in Oslo. And they are quite eloquent. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture of their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. It's not a lot to ask, but this is not calculated in the price of the coffee you drink. It's not calculated in the price of even the laptops you drink. And if you buy a very fancy electric car, which might cost 100,000, it would need a little bit less than 1%, and there would be all of this calculated in the price of your car. So we really have to change a lot. And I'm here to ask every one of you to stop being neutral. But I am also confessing that I was neutral and indifferent for most of my life. I'm 61, and only 9 years ago did I start thinking about all this. One could say it's never too late. Unfortunately, hundreds of millions of children were exploited in the meantime. So we can do a lot. But most importantly, we have to start immediately. And all of us have really the moral obligation to think about the negative impact we're having in others. This is really something very serious. We cannot just say, oh, somebody else will take care of this. Maybe nobody else will, as it happened to me. So I am asking everyone to understand what needs to be done, why I'm doing this, and most importantly, I am meeting every possible president that is willing to listen, every prime minister, every politician, every CEO, every shareholder, and everyone who understands that we cannot continue exploiting children. If the numbers of these professors from the University of Zurich are right, and Pennsylvania, 375 million, it's terrible. But worse, 1/3 of those 375 million are working directly in the supply chains of corporations and developed nations, which means for profit. Yes, so I am asking all of these corporations, including some that have more than 500,000 children and those few that have more than 1 million children, to fire all the children and hire adults. Yes, to pay the real wages for these adults and to make sure that the children go to school. Of course, if the mothers are hired for a decent wage, I am certain they will make sure that the children have all of this that Martin Luther King was talking about. Thank you very much, and please keep these words of Martin Luther King in mind. Thank you very much.